Welcome to BitBoy Crypto, the people's channel, home of the Bit Squad, the largest and greatest crypto community in all the interwebs. No channel works harder to keep you in the know about crypto. My name is Ben. Today we are going to talk about a coming recession, what this means, how Russia-Ukraine plays into this. We're going to be talking about the Fed rates. We got some surprising and then some not so surprising news from the Fed this week as we are heading towards the middle of March, which could be doomsday for crypto and the stock market and the whole economy. Okay, so it's a big video, so I'm not even really sure where to start. I guess we got to start where things are in Ukraine, because that is very important to this whole conversation. This could end up, and this is going to sound very callous, but accept it for face value at what it is. The conflict over in Ukraine with Russia could actually help out the markets in the United States for this year. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. We do have the Fed supposed to raise rates in the middle of March. Most people were expecting a 50 bips or 50 point raise, 0.5% basically is what it boils down to. Now, pretty much across the board, it is now considered to be that a 25 bip or a 0.25% rate raise will be the max. So that is the kind of, not so surprising news. But kind of the more surprising news is it doesn't look like, regardless of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine right now, that they're considering not raising rates. Why are they not considering, or why is not raising rates in March off the table? Our economy's in shambles. It is heading towards what could be the scariest economic move of our entire lifetimes. And I know that sounds very doomsday, but let's look at the latest GDP numbers, okay? The latest GDP numbers that came out for the United States were 7% growth in the economy over quarter four. That's not a huge percentage of growth, okay? So let's compare that to the CPI number, the Consumer Price Index, which they use for, tracking inflation, which is totally made up number. The number's probably way, way more than that, but it's also about 7% year over year. So if our economy, now we're comparing quarter to year, but let's just think about this. If our economy grew 7%, but inflation is up 7% over the last year, did we actually grow the economy at all? Many people would argue that we haven't, that we've actually been going backwards and the numbers are being inflated, to borrow a term from, current buzzwords, okay? So if the economy is not growing, inflation is only getting worse, where are we heading? And you also have to take into consideration on this discussion the fact that wages in the United States are not rising. That was also a report that just came out. So regardless of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now, and we're not going to get too geopolitical today about this. We'll talk, I'm sure, about this on the live stream this week, as we need to start looking at what a solution could look like. How does this end? How long does this go? The longer it goes, most likely the better for our economy. That's a very dark thing to say, but that's true. If this is over very quickly, then there will probably be much more aggressive raising of rates. Now, none of us want war. We don't want this to continue. Nobody wants this to continue. We wish there was a solution to this yesterday. People, I think it's like 25 civilians and 100 civilians, or 25 civilians have died in Ukraine, 100 have been injured. We all see the footage. I was actually watching these people today on some news channel talking about how professional the operation was and how there hasn't really been that much damage compared to what Russia could do. So I don't know, that was also like a very dark thing to hear people saying, but it is what it is at this point, guys, that, there hasn't been a ton of, collateral damage at this point, other than the main targets. There's been a lot of damage to buildings, but it could be a lot worse, and it could get a lot worse. There's now talks of nuclear threats and stuff like this. So this can unfold in a very dramatically different way, one way or the other. But if it continues, that's going to really stifle the plans of the Fed to raise rates. But at minimum, over this year, they're going to have to raise rates like 1%, Why? As inflation continues to grow and as GDP continues to stifle, as wages continue to hit ceilings and not rise above the cost of inflation, this leads to protesting. This leads to civil unrest. This leads to, people wanting to take action because they're, maybe people aren't necessarily hungry. I know there are certainly people in the United States that are hungry, but your middle class people, it's not like they're starving at this point. But when they can't pay their car payments, when they can't pay their mortgage, this stuff starts to add up and the middle class really, really, really gets affected. So where does this put us at? This puts us, it looks like, almost no matter what at this point, heading towards an absolute recession. The question is the timing. When does this happen? Does this happen at the end of this year? Some forecasters are saying November, December. Some people are saying next year will be a very dark year. I believe last year it was going to be this year, but things have just continued to be pushed and pushed and pushed. Jerome Powell should be fired. The fact that Jerome Powell did not raise rates already and is so far behind the eight ball that now, in light of a world disaster, a war, the biggest war in Europe, by the way, since World War II, the biggest invasion since World War II, his hands are tied. He can't do anything because he waited too long and kept saying that inflation was transitory, which meant that it was just, for a short period of time and it'd go back to normal. What an idiot. Jerome Powell needs to be fired. There's no question about it. I don't even know who has the power to do that. I assume, technically the Federal Reserve is a private entity, but all of its board members are from the government, so it's a little confusing on who. I'm not sure who would actually make that call, but he needs to be fired. He has gotten our economy in the worst shape that it's in my lifetime that it's been in. And so we really have to wonder what's going to happen. And well, if you really want to, get into it here, World Economic Forum looks like a great time for a great reset. It's probably what they're going to be pushing for. But we don't know what's going to happen ultimately with Russia and Ukraine. But in the United States, we do know recession is probably coming at some point. Now, can they extend it another year and it doesn't come till 2024? I don't know. But how does this affect crypto? How does this affect Bitcoin? Well, a lot of people have already factored in a 50 BIP or a 50 a 0.5% increase at the Fed meeting coming in March that will enact in the middle of March. But now the general thought is there's no way it can be less, or there's no way it can be more than 25 bips or 0.25%. So all that being said, and all that being taken into consideration, this could be good for the markets. And then of course, if the invasion and the war unravels and gets to be a larger conflict and we get drawn into that, there will probably be another plunge down, but ultimately that would be bullish for the price of Bitcoin. And let me tell you, I tweeted about this on Twitter, best place to tweet. I'm so sick of people saying that I or anyone else, that we can't comment on the realities of our financial situation because there's a war going on somewhere and people are getting hurt. That's so idiotic. Guys, what matters more to you individually as a person if you live in the United States? Now, if you live in Europe, this is a little more complicated. If you live in the United States, what matters more? People that you don't know in a situation that you cannot affect, or your future ability to be able to provide for your family? Because ultimately, the end result is the same for either one. If you can't provide for your family, then your family's on the street, the same place people in Ukraine are finding themselves. Just because you're not under a dire attack of your physical safety, that doesn't mean you can't be concerned about your portfolio. These are very important, big picture things that people need to talk about and need to understand. So when it comes to how to manage this crisis and understand this situation, when it comes to your portfolio, the best thing that I can tell you right now, stand pat. Just stand pat. We don't know if this is the best place to get in. We don't know if this is a great place to sell. We just don't know yet. We have to wait and see how things unravel a little bit more. But if you are the type of person that you want to get ahead and maybe take advantage of what's presented before you, whether it's to get out of the market, in the market, just remember, don't just pick one strategy. Don't go all in on one thing. Maybe if you're feeling scared, you want to sell some and move it to the side. Maybe if you think this is ultimately going to end in price action for Bitcoin going up, maybe you want to accumulate some, keep more money on the sideline. That's the most important thing. Part of whatever the plan you want to do that, but don't go all in on one strategy. That's never a great thing to do in a time of uncertainty. So later today, I'm going to be back. We're going to be talking a little bit about XRP, SWIFT, what this means with Russia. They've just been removed from the SWIFT banking system. We're going to talk a lot about that in a video tonight. And then also don't forget, tomorrow we have Jeremy Hogan and John Deaton coming on the channel to discuss XRP and the case. All right, guys, that's all I got. Be blessed. Bye-bye.